Okay, then where do we start? Somebody give me a clue as to where we begin. Yeah,
Can you repeat, please?
sorry. Give me some kind of a clue about where we begin. What do we do? We do research methodology and continue with.
I don't know. I think that you should continue maybe because
Sorry.
I guess that is, I don't know, maybe you can continue because last time we checked about the importance of the language in the research, in the methodology, in the study, no, in accordance to Chomsky. So
Yeah.
you are talking about the meaning of the message, the words or something like this.
Semantics,
Semantic,
syntax, and semiotics.
semiotic. Mm.
Okay. So I'll just basically go through that for a minute so that it doesn't look like we are starting in the middle. So last time we were talking about linguistics and the importance of linguistics in research methodology. And the reason why I told you that we are talking about linguistics in the context of research methodology is because one, uh, you need a language to communicate with each other. Though people like Chomsky have a tendency to say, more than Chomsky, it is actually Althusser who has a tendency to say that, this thing uh, of a language having a structure, and that these structures being absolutely similar in all languages. The syntactic. Steph, can we go on? All right. Now that that piece of celestial conversation, because I don't know where it came from. So let's get back down to earth, speak about the linguistic turn that research took. When we talk about the linguistic turn of research, why are we talking about that? People would say that either a search or a research is something that you do with the help of a language. And I was saying people like Chomsky to a certain extent, and definitely Ludwig Wittgenstein believe that the primary form of language is thought. Okay, it's thought which is the most primary form of language. which goes quite contrary to what the empiricists believe, basically. They believe that language evolves along with what we are seeing, uh, what we are listening. So language evolves with that. That is what the empiricists will tell you. And when Ludwig Wittgenstein was very much under the influence, he was never an empiricist, uh, but Ludwig Wittgenstein was somebody who believed in language and empirical reference. He believed that why would you have a language until and unless a word is being used to represent something. Okay, if there is no object like a table, would you call it a table at all? Because there's no object called table. So when somebody made this particular object called the table, then the word came. But if you go back to Plato, I told you Plato believed that in the forms of, in the realm of forms, which is actually the souls, the real knowledge is gained with souls interacting with each other. And so when we are born, we are not born with an empty head. That is a Lockean construct, that we are born with an empty head. Most of the Greeks, and most definitely uh, Plato, believed that we are born with knowledge. Knowledge is innate. It is not something that is acquired by looking at uh, the outside world and finding words to designate the things that we see in the outside world. Okay, that is uh, what is the argument that Chomsky is making. The argument is that no, we don't have to look at something to know what it is. So he used language and used it brilliantly as an example to go around proving what he was saying. So, what was he saying? That's the question. Uh, he was saying that if the primary form of language is thought, we don't acquire the ability to think while looking at objects. Okay, we have the ability to think by not having to necessarily look at objects. Okay, we just think about a lot of things, and those don't need empirical reference. So that's the thing that is being said by Chomsky. So he's almost like Plato, and he says what makes it possible for different people to learn different languages. I have given you the example. If somebody is born to a Spanish father and a Japanese mother, and he's brought up in a Marwadi family in India, uh, he'll speak Hindi. So you don't have to be shocked. How is this possible? Somebody who has uh, Spanish father and a Japanese mother, how is he able to speak Hindi? Okay, so the question is nature, nurture. Is it in our nature, or do we have to nurture this ability? Here, Chomsky breaks the binary. Okay, Chomsky breaks the binary and says that you don't have to think that language and thought are nurtured right from the most primary level. You can be nurtured to use a language in a certain way. You can be nurtured to use certain kind of words and not use certain kinds of words in the presence of different kinds of people. That's the nurturing process. But that's not the primary thing that your mind does. Your mind has thought. So what does this mind do when it has thought? It tries to express the thoughts in the form of sounds that designate different things. It could be an emotion. It could be a description of a particular thing, whatever it is. But this is something that language is capable of doing all on its own. So if a Spanish father and a Japanese mother can have a Hindi speaking child, how is it possible that he's speaking Hindi? That's the question, right? So what Chomsky says is that he's a bit of a structuralist here. So let me explain structuralism very quickly. Structuralism basically believes in the unity of knowledge. Okay, structuralism says that people break up things into various different disciplines, uh, like physics, chemistry, political science, sociology. People uh, break up the language into these different things. And why do they do that? That is to make what is otherwise an extremely complex language. It makes that language suddenly amenable to communication between human beings. And uh, if you listen to Chomsky, Chomsky will again say that what gives us the ability to learn multiple languages? How are we learning multiple languages? And the answer again to that particular question is from Chomsky. He says thought and finding sounds express to express a certain thought, a certain emotion. That protocol, that protocol of language is already built into our heads at the time of birth itself. So let's look at it this way. I give you some stupid examples. One, because I'm a very stupid fellow. And the second thing is because stupid examples I have seen serve a wonderful purpose. They can actually simplify an unnecessarily complex construct. So, all right, so let us say, what is the sound and thought bit? If somebody throws a stone at you and it hits you on, by stone, I don't mean a pebble, somebody's a granite piece, somebody throws it at you, and you don't know it's going to come and hit you because it's coming from behind. If it comes and hits you, what do you say? You say, ah, right? You don't go, that's not what you do, right? Because pain is anguish, and the sound that represents anguish is ah, man, not ha 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 ha. It's not that. These protocols are already built into our mind. I don't know, these days I have started seeing a lot of Netflix, and I see a lot of horror movies. I love horror movies because I actually like comedies, and unlike Aristotle, who said tragedy is the best way to get rid of your emotions, catharsis, as he called it. So he advocated watching and reading tragic dramas and books, but I like to have a bit of a laugh. Otherwise, I'm a pretty big tragedy myself, and I cause all kinds of tragic problems to my students on a daily basis. So I decided, let me just watch horror films. And it is something that happened simply by chance that horror films are the real comedies. If you don't believe me, you should see horror films, especially Spanish horror films. Okay? Or even better than Spanish horror films are Indonesian uh, horror films. My favorite director is Rocky Suraya. He makes great movies. You're looking at it, you're dying of laughter, and you're being told that this is a horror film. Anyway, so what I'm trying to tell you is that the expression of emotions is to a certain extent dependent on what we see and how we see it. But primarily, it is something that is contained in the head. What sound does is that it codifies thoughts. If you don't codify thoughts, you cannot construct sentences. You cannot construct meaningful sentences. I can construct a perfectly grammatical sentence wherein I'll say, Daniel handy no, I don't know when, and then I tried. That's a grammatical sentence. There's nothing wrong with the grammar. Did it make any sense to you? I think it made sense to Daniel, but did it make sense to any of the other people? So, what I'm trying to tell you is syntax is the most primary of all protocols that we find in languages. Syntax is the primary protocol because it lays down the rules of how you construct meaningful speech by emitting sounds that are understood properly by others. Please remember, language is not just thought, it's also sound. It's not words. That's the next step. Before it becomes words, it's just a sound. Okay? And you can make out from the sound itself as to what has happened to someone or what is happening to someone. So syntax is that protocol that tells you how to use this particular thing called uh, stringing of sounds. So while stringing sounds, the first thing we do is we form words. And the second thing we do is that we form simple sentences. And the third thing that we do is form complex sentences. So that is the protocol of grammar. If you just say it is, the past participle, present continuous, talk about things like that as rules, then you will never understand what language is. If you want to understand what language is, you have to take recourse to what the structuralists said. And what the structuralists said is that all languages are unified by the syntax. First and foremost, they are unified by syntax, which is the production of words by twisting your tongue, using your teeth, and using your lips. So when you are using all these things, then what happens is that you are forming words. Okay, you're forming words. The problem with most European languages is that they have a problem that is pre-syntax. Okay, a problem that is pre-syntax, which means before we come down to syntax, there is another thing that we have to know, which is, what do you call it? Why is that gone out of my head? This is the problem with old age. Thoughts go away, they don't come back. Yeah, so we are talking about phonology, as some people call it, but a better way to call it is phonetics. Now, Indian languages, most Indian languages, are amazing in their phonetics. They are absolutely amazing. You can only read something as what is written. If somebody writes Maria Jose Gomez Arieta, then if it is written in any of the Indian languages, you read it that way. But in her own language or in English, I can read it very differently. For example, I can read it as Mariajoscgomez. Read it like that. What is that? So that is the weakness of phonetics. Strongly phonetically based languages have clear cut sounds. Okay, they have clear cut sounds, and what you write is what you read exactly in the same way. You could also write something the way you're speaking. The way you're speaking, you can write. Okay. Maria is okay. It's not such a difficult thing. But one of the difficult things is another iteration of Maria, which is Marie. So what do you call that? The Americans call it Marie. The British call it Mari. And we Indians, since we have been ruled by the British, now we are turning American because uh, we unfortunately have to use software like Microsoft. So you people will see that the coming generations will have no way uh, to write proper spelling. So you send them to spelling bee, nothing happens there. Okay, why? That is because of the fact that when there is a multiplicity of pronunciations, of the same word, then which is correct? Nowadays, I don't watch TV so much, but at a time I did used to watch TV, and I found quite a few of these voiceovers who make announcements on television. There again, either English or American. And how do they basically pronounce February? How do they pronounce that? They pronounce that. Would somebody like to try? They pronounce that as February. Now I can understand you making an R silent after a vowel. Okay, R, R. The Americans will roll it and say R. The British will just say R, or it'll be O. The British will say O. So you see, there are multiple ways of pronouncing these words. That is the case with all Latin-derived words. Okay, and since I spoke about Indian languages, let me just give you a quick clarification. Many people think that it is Sanskrit that basically made it possible for people to read the language the way it is written, which is not true because Sanskrit did not have a script till about the 11th century C. So Sanskrit is not the root of phonetics. It's not the root of phonetics. The root of phonetics, if you really trace it back, it actually comes from South India with a language which is called Brahmi language. It had a script that could conjugate vowels, consonants, all of them together. It could conjugate them together in an extremely clear form. I heard people laugh at Indians because we say Rome. I tell them, why are you laughing? It's not Rome, it's Rome. So I say, So please show me how you write re. Just write re instead of r. Show it to me. So they write, and you say, but this is R. There is no r sound anywhere in it. When you say the letter R, R, there is no sound of the uh, letter of R. But if you go to Maria, you can call her Maria Jose Gomez Arrieta. Because in Spanish, people have a tendency to emphasize the R's, which is exactly opposite of what English is. You don't emphasize the R's in English, but in Spanish, you emphasize the R's. But the problem is XAPI. Can somebody tell me what that is? How do you pronounce it? It's a proper name, proper noun. XAVI. X is pronounced ch. XAVI is chavi. That is chavi. Okay, fine. Then let's try to understand J. When we write a J, we pronounce that as J or Z or J or whatever. But the Spanish pronounce J as ha. So Juan, we will have a tendency to read it as Juan. That is not right. The right pronunciation is Juan. So fine. So I have a very good friend, a Spanish lady. She asked me, why is English so difficult? Why is all this confusion there about, pronunciations? You should be able to read a language the way it is written. And I told her, I'm surprised you are saying this because this is exactly what you do. So she said, no, we don't do it. I said, are you sure? She said, absolutely. Then I said, what is Jorge? Jorge. When you pronounce it as Jorge, J and G are the same. And you'll say Juan for Juan. But if somebody writes Jaume, which is again a proper noun, it is Jaume. So I said, you people also have exactly the same problems that all Europeans languages have. Perhaps from among the modern European languages, the one with least problems in terms of writing and pronouncing that thing that you write is Italian. It has its own problems. Okay, it's the problem with Italian is ka, si. At one this thing you say ciao, ciao, ciao is hi or bye. It works both ways. Ciao. But if somebody is Luca, that's his name. He's not Lucha, he's Luca. Somebody who writes Cadalora writes with a C, Cadalora. And if you look at the Roman interventions into Italian languages, I heard so many people say Cicero, a philosopher. Cicero, what is Cicero? It's Cicero. The Romans never used C as cha. They used it as C. It's not Cicero, it's not Caesar, it's not all those. But when it becomes Italian, it creates problems. So what I'm trying to tell you, therefore, is that the phonetic base can be a problem with a language when it comes to communication. So even before we talk about syntax, we should be talking about the phonetic base of a language. And very, very unfortunately, this is just an academic exercise. It's not like slinging mud at anyone. You see that the European languages are extremely primitive in terms of their phonetics, or if you want, call it phonology. They're very primitive. And the Indian languages, even the primitive languages, were pretty good. They were pretty good, except for a few changes here and there. They have survived in their original form. So when I told this to someone, they said, then why do you say I'll teach in English? And I told that person, see, just because I told you Indian languages have a better phonetic base, it is not to tell you that we should study in our languages. Our languages have their own inadequacies. They have their own inadequacies. I said, somebody tell me, how do I teach in Hindi or Telugu hermeneutics? How do we teach that? What would you call it? Hermeneutics, or as The Germans say hermeneutics. I prefer the original, which is hermeneutics. So when you say this thing and you want me to teach that in an Indian language, it's unteachable. It's unteachable simply because of the fact that there are not enough sound conjugations in Indian languages that can explain hermeneutics in one word. Hermeneutics is one word. But Indian languages cannot explain it in one word. Indian languages cannot explain German words like verstehen, verstand, Vorstellung. They all mean the same thing, but in different ways in German. It basically means understanding, but in different ways. Verstehen becomes empathy. If I say, I feel your pain, then that is verstehen. If I say, yeah, first I understood your lecture, so I'd say, verstanden. That is the more simple thing. Vorstellung, I have forgotten one bit about it, so let me not tell you the wrong thing about it. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is that the linguistic turn is extremely important. While you are looking at the language, the structures may be the same. Structures of grammar, syntax may be the same, but it is the way that the sounds that are emanated by the users of those languages which distinguish one from another. One from another. Okay? The English say thief. TH is th. Thief. But the river THAMES then should be Thames. But it's not. It's Thames. So you see that we have to grapple with the difficulties of pronunciation, especially when you are doing your research in, why do I have 2 meetings in 5 minutes? I'll be dead. Okay, so the thing there is that we are at the mercy of language if we have to understand ourselves. And by understanding ourselves, there are different ways in which one can do it. One can do it in as what the ancient Indian did. They meditated, dhyana, which went to China and became Chan, and went to Japan and became Zen. Okay, but the root word is dhyana. What is dhyana? People will tell you you have to sit in a certain way, cross your legs in a certain way, and close this circuit like this, hold your hands like this, and sit and think of what. That's not dhyana. It's not dhyana at all. Dhyana is introspection. by not getting distracted by other things. So why are you saying it's introspection? That is because of the worldview that Indians had. And what is the worldview that the Indians had? The whole universe is a living organism. There's nothing dead in it, not even stones, sand. All these things have soul. They have a soul. So nothing is a dead thing at all if you go by the concept of dharma. But you shouldn't look at dharma alone. You should look at karma. If you lead an adharmic life, you have bad karma, which is dushkarma, and you'll have a next life, which is very bad. Or you'll have suffering in this life itself. If you do good things, then you have sukarma. That means you've led a dharmic life, which means that you get a noble birth, you live comfortably. And if you've done excellently, you break the cycle of life and death. Okay? Now, this cycle of life and death, in English, it is called transmigration of the soul. What is transmigration? Why is it not just migration? If you want to say that it is moving from one form to another, why do you have to say transmigration? Doesn't migration itself give you the idea that the soul is moving into another form? So you see, the problem with language, while it is universal in terms of its syntax, the problem comes with phonetics, and because of phonetics, the next problem that we see is semantics. Phonetics and semantics together can create havoc, absolute havoc in the use of language. Now, what I am doing here, just in case you're wondering, what is this fellow going on and on and on and on about language and all that? I'm trying to tell you the importance of language in research, whatever research. What I'm also trying to do is that I am trying to introduce you to the idea of philosophical research or theoretical research, which is substantially different from empirical research. So we've talked about research, but we have never talked about methodology. First, let me establish what is theory tomorrow. And it won't take too long. And then we'll go into methodology and how these two words, which meant the same thing for the Greeks, philosophy and methodology, science, they all meant the same thing for the Greeks. But for us, they all mean completely different things. They are completely different things. So what were those significant interventions that led to this situation? That is what But before I go into methodology, I just want to finish a bit more about philosophy. And I have to do semiotics. So I'll keep it as short as possible so that I don't lose my audience. So if any of you is tending to get a headache, take a tablet called Grenil, Grenil. Take two of them and your headache will go away after my lecture. Don't take it before. While I'm lecturing, before that, if you take it, the headache. All right then. Thank you very much. Very kind of you. So I'll see you tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Professor.
ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good night.
You, sir.
Who's that? Kavya. Okay. Right.